What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. In today's episode, I'm going to be bringing you guys a preview of the independents in college football, along with a kind of rapid-fire look at each of the other four Group of Five conferences. If you saw my previous videos, I went over the American Conference in its own video, but for the sake of getting these out in anticipation ahead of the season, I'm going to bring them all together and put the independents in it as well, because a video on the independents by themselves is also kind of maybe not quite worth doing. If you do want a video, though, on Notre Dame or on one of these conferences, let me know, and I can maybe put some small together. But it's also a busy time for me getting ready for the high school season to get started here. For those of you who are new to the channel, I don't claim to be an expert on college football, although some of you in the comments seem to think so. I just enjoy talking about it, and I do my best in the position that I'm in. But I've also got high school football coming up here, high school volleyball, cross country, golf, tennis, all those other things going on. But I do like bringing you guys who are loyal to the channel content about college football and just kind of my perspective and thoughts on it. But before I get into it, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But we're going to start things out because I know that's what's probably the biggest fan base is Notre Dame. That's probably why a lot of you clicked onto this video. The Fighting Irish, obviously 14-2 last year, national runner-up, and they look for one more win. All they needed last year was one more win and really a slightly better start against Ohio State or a little bit more late, and they would have had that national championship. Offensively, this is a running back pairing that really is second to only one other pairing, I think, in the country. That's Penn State's Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. For the Fighting Irish, is Jeremiah Love, who rushed for over 1,100 yards, and Jadarian Price, who rushed for just over 900 yards. So these two guys combined for over 2,000 yards on the ground. At quarterback, the Irish announced that C.J. Carr is going to be the one to get the nod. He'll be working with Jaden Greathouse, who really emerged, especially in the playoffs last year, along with Virginia transfer Malachi Fields and Wisconsin transfer Will Pauling. I think those are a couple of good additions. They also have three offensive lineman starters returning. That's led by guard Charles Jagusa and then tackle Emil Wagner. So this is an offensive continuity. Obviously, Riley Leonard is gone at quarterback, but I think the Fighting Irish continue to do what they do best, and that's run the football, and I think they'll continue to do that at a high level. Defensively, they had a top four defense. They were fourth in both scoring and pass defense last year. They've got a new defensive coordinator, Chris Ash. This defense as well was probably among the best in the country at creating turnovers. They finished with a plus 18 turnover margin. I think that was second to only one other team that I'm going to talk about, I think, later in this video, who had a plus 20 turnover margin. But the Irish defense was really good last year. Boubacar Traore, a defensive end, he was injured all of last year, but he's coming back this year. Linebacker Drake Brown, and cornerbacks Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, and then safety Aiden Schuler. That is probably one of the secondaries in college football. If you saw my video on the secondaries, definitely a little bit of a misfire there, missing the Fighting Irish is among the best secondaries in college football. I think they're definitely better than a couple other teams that I put on that list. In terms of key games, they're obviously opening the season at Miami. It's a good opponent. It's not a formidable road venue, though. Hurricanes fans, maybe you prove me wrong with this one, but I think, if anything, there's going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans there, and we'll see if the stadium even fills up. I'd imagine it would, because it's a marquee game, week one of the season, but we'll see. In Miami, there's a lot of other things to do besides go to football games. They also have home games against Texas A&M, Boise State, and USC. And then, obviously, the upset has been the thing that's been kind of their Achilles heel, at least in the regular season recently. I think at Boston College, at Pitt, and home against Syracuse are all some of those potential upset watch games, and that doesn't even mention a team like a Navy or one of those other games against the quote-unquote like lesser opponent. I am projecting Notre Dame to go what I think will be 12-0 this year. I could certainly see one loss, and they can afford to probably get one loss, maybe two if it's that opener against Miami, and depending on which team they lose to and how good they do this season, if it's A&M and they make the playoff or get close. Either way, though, this is a team that's probably going to have to finish with one loss or better, and I think they can run the table. I think Miami is really their biggest hurdle. I think they clear that, and after that, it's smooth sailing for the Fighting Irish. Sure, they probably have a close call here or there, but I think it's a good season for them. For the other independents, I'm kind of just going to be posing a question. If you want me to go into these teams more, let me know, and maybe I can later this season or something like that. For UConn, the question is, can the Huskies replicate what was an amazing 9-4 season? This program has not had a lot of winning in recent years, and they did that last year. Jim Mora has done a really fantastic job as the head coach there, and so the question for UConn is, can they do that again? For Washington State, it's how can they weather the loss of John Mateer at quarterback? It was kind of a lot of upheaval with the coaching change over the offseason. Jimmy Rogers is coming in his first year. So to me, that's the biggest question. The second would be how Rogers adjusts in his first year as head coach. But I think that's the main question, is who steps up at quarterback in place of Mateer, who obviously went to Oklahoma. Then for Oregon State, can they avoid the late season collapse? They started 4-1 last year, a pretty good start, and then really fell apart down the stretch, finishing 1-6 to end the season with a 5-7 mark. So for the Beavers, the question that I'm asking here is, are they able to turn the tables? And if they get off to a strong start like they did last year, can they carry that on through the rest of the season? Obviously, those two teams have that very unique home and home series in a single season. We see plenty of home and home series over 2 seasons, or rivalries, conference matchups that kind of go back and forth over the years. But this is very unique, so that'll be interesting to see. Now, moving into Conference USA, I think Liberty is the clear favorites despite losses of Caden Salter at quarterback and running back Quinton Cooley. They've got a big early test at Jacksonville State in Week 2. That's going to certainly, I would imagine, be one of the games that I talk about in my Week 2 preview video. They do bring in a good quarterback, Coastal Carolina transfer Ethan Vasco, and then UNLV wide receiver Casey Kane. Their defense is led by a couple of really good players, TJ Bush at the defensive end position, and cornerback Joseph Carter. They have probably 6, maybe 7 all-conference caliber players on the defensive side of the ball. So the Flames should be a good defense, especially in this conference. So the question for me then, looking at the other contenders, is who between kind of the main ones, Sam Houston State, Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee State, and Jacksonville State, can compete and contend. There was a big matchup last week between two of these teams in Week 0. That was Sam Houston State at Western Kentucky. The Hilltoppers pretty much took care of Sam Houston State pretty comfortably, a 41-24 win. So they definitely put themselves in the driver's seat, I think, among these contenders. I kind of saw that going into it. I know it's easy to say right now. I was hoping to get this video out before the season kicked off, but that was kind of my outlook there. Jacksonville State, I think, among those teams, has the best shot. Western Kentucky looked really good in Week 0, but I still think it's Jacksonville State. The Gamecocks retool a top 20 offense. They're home against Liberty. They'll be home against Western Kentucky, and then they're on the road at Sam Houston and Middle Tennessee State. Another thing to watch here, Missouri State and Delaware are the two teams joining both the FBS and this conference, obviously, as well. The question here is, can either one of these teams, especially the Bears, I think they have a better shot. I think the Blue Hens are projected to finish a little lower. Can they replicate what Jacksonville State did last year and get into the FBS and kind of even thrive? Certainly do pretty well. My prediction for the conference, though, in Conference USA is Liberty over Jacksonville State, which I have as a revenge game. I think in the regular season, Liberty will lose to Jacksonville State. Those two teams will meet, like I said earlier, in Week 2. I could see that if the Flames lose one game in conference play, I think that'll be it. I think they also are maybe ranked at the bottom of FBS for the easiest strength of schedule this year. And then they've also got an interesting game in Week 3 at Bowling Green State. And that leads me now into the MAC, the Mid-American Conference. Moving into the MAC now. The favorite here, it's really hard to predict the MAC a lot of times. It's kind of a little bit like the Big 12. Toledo is kind of the consensus favorite. They've got Tucker Gleason at quarterback. He threw for over 2,800 yards, 24 touchdowns last year. Chip Trainum, the former Ohio State running back, who also had a stop at Kentucky, is now with the Rockets. Wide receiver Junior Vandeross III. They had the top defense in the MAC last year. Cornerback Avery Smith is kind of the centerpiece of that defense, probably the best player there. The other contenders, to me, and most others, are Buffalo, Ohio, and Miami, Ohio. Buffalo has questions on offense. Quarterback Taquan Robertson is back. Running back Al-Jay Henderson rushed for over 1,000 yards last year. And the defense, which returns 9 starters, ranked among the MAC's best. That's led by defensive lineman Kobe Stewart and George Wolo, along with linebacker Red Murdoch. They also have a deep secondary, and Murdoch produced some really good numbers last year. 156 tackles, 16 and a half tackles for loss, and 7 forced fumbles. That's an insane amount of forced fumbles for any player. And so he will be probably one of the best defensive players in the MAC this year. Ohio has quarterback Parker Navarro, who a certain actor has a pretty good knowledge about. He accounted for over 3,400 yards last year and 31 touchdowns. They've got a good running back coming in from Minnesota. They ranked 12th nationally in the run last year and 9th in total offense. They bring in what will be kind of a new look, obviously, with head coach Tim Albin being gone now to Charlotte. Brian Smith takes over. And their defense also was top 10 nationally. They did have some big portal losses. Shea Taylor, Bradley Weaver. The guys to keep an eye on, defensive lineman Anais Lukeman, DBs Ricky Hyatt Jr., who's transferring in from Kentucky and South Alabama. He had stops both of those places. Cornerback Tank Pearson. Miami of Ohio as well has a top 30 defense led by safety Eli Blakey, and then quarterback Daquan Finn, who's transferring in from Toledo. The dark horses in the conference to me are Northern Illinois and the team I mentioned when I was briefly talking about the Conference USA, Bowling Green. NIU had a top 15 defense last year. Obviously, they had a knack for big wins, beating Notre Dame last year. And they also had some close losses. 4 of their 5 were by 1 score. Coach Hammock there is a really good coach, and he's built a good program there for the Huskies. The other team that I mentioned, Bowling Green, head coach Eddie George is coming in, and he obviously is a big name in like Ohio football, obviously the former Buckeye, but even just kind of nationally. He did some good things for Tennessee State. They also have a solid offense overall and a defense that will have a new look, but ranked in the top 30 last year. So can they kind of reproduce some of that? I am going to go with Bowling Green to reach the conference championship game, but I think it's going to be Buffalo that comes out on top this year out of the MAC. Moving into the Mountain West now, the clear favorite here is Boise State, like they have been for many years. Top 10 offense led by Maddox Madsen at quarterback. Running back Malik Sherrod comes in from Fresno State. He's obviously got big shoes to fill, replacing Ashton Genty. Linebacker Latrell Caples and tight end Matt Lauder are a couple of other guys to watch in the passing game. The defense was among the best at getting into the backfield, getting to the quarterback specifically. They led the nation, so they were the best, with 55 sacks. Edge rusher Jaden Virgin Morgan had 15 and a half tackles for loss and 10 sacks. Defensive tackle Braxton Felly, and then cornerbacks Amarian McCoy and free safety Ty Benefield. So the Broncos are the clear favorites here. Who are some of the contenders that are going to be trying to unseat them? San Jose State has a top 5 passing offense. UNLV brings in Dan Mullen for Barry Odom. They were in the conference championship game last year. Air Force and Colorado State. Colorado State's really interesting to me. They won 6 of the last 7 regular season games, and they only lost by 8 to Oregon State and by 6 to Fresno State. So some of their losses last year were pretty close. To me, the big question is, can Dan Mullen click? And it didn't look great in week 0. Honestly, I was kind of thinking it'd be UNLV, and I don't want to change it simply for the fact that they didn't look as good, but Colorado State had a strong finish to the season last year. So I'm going to go with Boise State over Colorado State in the Mountain West. Finally, quickly running through the Sun Belt, the favorite here is James Madison, a team that continued the success even after Curt Cignetti left the team. They have some new additions this year. Quarterback Matthew Sluka, wide receiver Nick DeGonero. The Dukes had, what I mentioned earlier, kind of teased, was the best turnover margin in FBS and a top 25 defense. Defensive end Xavier Holmes, coming from Maine, will be a big addition for them as well. He had 6 sacks, 12 and a half tackles for loss, and was a all-CAA selection. The contenders here to compete against James Madison are Georgia Southern, Texas State, and Arkansas State. Georgia Southern has a good quarterback J.C. French IV, and a really good linebacker coming in from App State, Brendan Harrington. Texas State was the number 7 scoring offense, number 15 in the rush, and they have quarterback Nate Yarnell, and then they also had a top 3 Sun Belt defense last year, and that was led by defensive end Khalil Alexander with 11 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks. Arkansas State had a big improvement really over the last couple years, really making their way up the standings from finishing last in the conference in 2022 to finishing where they did last year. To me, the dark horse in this conference, Braylon Braxton is a quarterback here. He's one of the best in the Sun Belt. New head coach and cornerback Josh Moten. Charles Huff, the head coach. Both those guys are coming in from Marshall. Those are a couple good additions here. To me, I don't always do this, but when I pick a dark horse, there is kind of some reason for it. I think the influx of the coach and a really good cornerback, along with a really good quarterback, will be really big for Southern Miss. So my projection here is going with the favorites, kind of the safe pick here, James Madison. They have really good defense and a good offense over the Golden Eagles, over Southern Miss. But that is all for this episode of College Football Talk, my look at the Group of 5 conferences outside the American and the independent schools. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, who you expect to win these conferences and how good you expect the 4 independents that I talked about to finish this year. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.